Hi, this is Andrew from Space Tech, and this is the Getting Started guide for OrBIt software. I have a Windows 10 machine here. Windows 11 is fine with nothing installed, so I'm going to run the OrBIt install and start from the beginning here. I'll accept the license agreement, and OrBIt will install. And I'm going to choose to launch it so we can use it right away. You're going to see a login come up. It will remember your previous login once you've logged in previously, so I don't have to enter it here, but you enter your email address for your OrBIt account, click send code, and that should send you a code via email to log in. So I'll go grab my code here. Enter that in. And once it's verified, OrBIt will open. And here we are. I'm going to go ahead and connect to my car. It's already connected, but for you, if you don't have the car connected, you'll need to connect it with a VOE adapter and to a network port. Preferably on a laptop computer is the easiest way to do it, and you'll need one that has a network port or get a USB adapter for network. And once I connect here, so the first time I connect to a car I've never connected to before, it doesn't have a profile on this computer for OrBIt, so for this car. So we'll need to go ahead and create one, and OrBIt will prompt us to do that. And the car profile section down here that keeps information for the car, it's going to let us know that we need to create a profile. I'm going to go ahead and click that now, and OrBIt's going to read the car and try to find all the ECUs that are in the car, which is part of building the profile. That's going to take a little bit. That's probably one of the longest processes, so maybe 3 or 4 minutes. So be patient when it's doing this. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video now, and then I'll pick it up when the profile is complete. So now our profile is complete here, as OrBIt reported. So now we have a profile. The button changes to update profile. You likely will never need to do that, but it's there as a troubleshooting step if you have issues in the future. So probably if support, I direct you to. Otherwise, you probably never need to use that. You'll see the Set CEM Pin button has lit up, letting us know that we don't have a CEM pin for the car. We can do diagnostics now, but without the CEM pin, you can't do any configuration. So discuss that in a sec. We'll take a look at some diagnostics first. So there's some pretty basic diagnostics in OrBIt right now. You can read trouble codes. You can clear trouble codes. There's a button here to reset all the ECUs, which is a warm reset of all the ECUs in the car. If I read the codes on my car here, I think there's one stored right now. OrBIt's going to go out and query all the ECUs and find the codes. We have one reported from the VCM, it looks like. When it finishes, it'll show a report of all the codes. And there's a database of translation, so we try to translate them if we can, but it'll let you know if it's not able to find a translation for the code. So I have a code now in the VCM, no communication over Ethernet to IHU. That's the infotainment unit. That's a pretty junk code, so I'd probably just clear that. That just means that when the units were booting up, it couldn't find the IHU, which boots up slower. So if I have codes like that and I want to clear them, I'm just going to clear all the DTCs. It's going to ask me to confirm, and then OrBIt's going to go out and clear them all. When it finishes, I can go through and read them again and verify that there are no codes stored currently. Looks like we have another code reported from the IHU. That's another fairly innocuous code. It doesn't turn on any lights or anything. Particular code I've seen a lot. Let's see if we can clear it again. So I'll leave that alone for now. DTCs. You can also reset all the ECUs. So if you want to reboot all the ECUs, it's a soft reset, kind of like restarting your computer. And then we'll send the command to all the ECUs in the car and then return the results. Since we're resetting all the ECUs in the car, it has to reconnect to the car when it comes back up. So while that's happening, I'll show you the car info over here. There's just some basic info here, so it lets you know what the battery charge is. One thing to know about the battery, you can see this is 13.5 volts. That's because I have a power supply connected. And this is also the charge of the, my car is a gas car, so this is just the charge of the low voltage battery. That's what LV is, the 12 volt. On the drivetrain part, if you have a PHEV or an EV, this oil level, which we show now, will change to the high voltage battery state of charge. So you'll see that there. But you'll still see the 12 volt above. It's good to know that when you're doing diagnostics, you should always connect a power supply. You can get away with not connecting one, but the battery's going to run down fairly quickly. So that's important to know. The other thing you'll see here is the mode shows active. For most diagnostics and definitely for programming, you need to be in active mode. I'll refer you to the Space Tech website, FAQ, which will tell you how to get the car into active mode. It's very simple for the gas cars that have an ignition knob, and then there's a particular procedure for EVs that don't have an ignition knob. You just get in and go. But both of them can be put into active mode. So this is just letting you know it's in active mode. Now we need to see about our CEM pin, because if we want to do any configuration, we're going to need that. There are many ways to get your CEM pin, and that's really something that's outside of OrBIt. It's how Volvo works. You have to have a password for the CEM. So you'll deal with this with any configuration software, but OrBIt has some tools to help make that easier. I won't go too deep into the process here. I can have a separate video, or I'll put up an FAQ for that. But many people know that you can use the factory diagnostic tool to capture some information about the car. And that's typically using Vita to run a configuration test or another software install that unlocks the CEM when we grab that information. And there's two ways that OrBIt helps you to get that information. We can get a CEM pin from a log, and OrBIt will take a Vita log if it has the information that you need, and it'll also take a Wireshark capture. So I'll show you those both. This one is for my car, so I'll run that because we need to get the CEM pin in here. And with a Vita log, if the VIN that the log is from matches the car that's connected, once it finishes cracking the pin here, it takes about 30 seconds to a minute. It's going to ask me if I want to add the CEM pin. So I'll say okay. That makes it super easy. And you can see the pin that it cracked here, so you can record that for yourself if you want to have a CEM pin for your car. There's also the matter of the VGM pin. You'll see here my car doesn't have a VGM. Only Android-based cars have the VGM. It's another, it's a firewall in the diagnostic port that needs to be unlocked to make configuration changes, so you need a pin for that too. OrBIt will also find VGM pin in logs, whether it's a Vita log or a Wireshark capture. So if I used a Wireshark capture here, which I have an example, I'll open that, and OrBIt will attempt to crack the pins, and you can see the detector, there's VGM in there, and it cracked the CEM and the VGM pin. That's for a car that's not connected. We don't know what car it is with a Wireshark capture anyway, so you'll just get the results here. If you wanted to enter the pin in, or you already know the PIN for your car, that same button over here that said add CEM pin before goes to change because we already have one. But you can just enter in the pin that you know. So if I enter that here, I won't save it because that's not the right pin for my car. But you can enter the pin directly if you already know it. If you have a VGM, you'll have the same button here for the VGM pin. My car just doesn't have one, so there's no VGM pin needed. You also see this says backup stored here, so we need some information about the car, which most of it comes with OrBIt, and it has the configuration information it needs. If you happen to have a car that is the latest update and OrBIt is not up to date on the latest configuration information, you may get prompted to back this up as well. You only need to worry about that if this button turns yellow and it says it needs to back up some information, then that needs to be done before you can make configuration changes, but you only have to do that once. But most people won't see that. It's really if we get behind on the latest updates. But OrBIt downloads those from the internet, so it's generally up to date. Now, once everything here, there's nothing I need to do here, configuration should be open. I'll disconnect from the car for a sec so we can see that we're licensed. So when I connect to the car, we're going to see the VIN, and then we should see user license for flashing. So that's matching the VIN of the car against your license. So if you have any problems with that, contact support at spacetech.com and we'll correct it. But you should see the car that you're licensed for when you connect to it is licensed for flashing. So this is my configuration here. There are a subset of items shown. It's a large list. I'll probably add a search feature, but the base list shows you kind of a subset of things that you can configure. And all these things can generally be configured without messing anything up in the car or needing any hardware changes. So the one I usually use is speed limit. So you can see my car here is set without speed limit. And I can change that. So I could pick maybe 190 miles an hour because, unlimited is too fast. And then that will light up yellow. So I know when I'm looking through the list what things that I just changed. If I click show everything, that's going to show every configuration item that we know about. And that has a lot more things. So many of them you may not necessarily want to change. Like I probably shouldn't change my car to 2 doors because it's not really going to do anything. It's probably going to mess things up. But there are many other things that you can discover in here and make changes. So some of them are like the audio system. I've changed my car to the Bowers and Wilkins audio system, so I've changed the configuration to the Bowers and Wilkins audio system in here. So there's much to learn, and I don't necessarily know about every possible configuration item you could change, but I'll go over some of the ones that I've changed once I show you how to make a configuration change. So once I make a change, I've changed my speed limit here. I can come up here and click write to car, and then OrBIt's going to prompt me. It's going to tell me what is changing. It's going to say okay, and now it's going to change the configuration of the car. So it's going to go into a flashing process. There's a lot of programming checks it does to make sure everything is safe and ready to program. So it's pretty quick though, so we'll wait a sec for it here. What I'll also do is while that's going, talk about saving settings. So we'll get to restore to OEM, which is the way that you can remove all configuration changes made by OrBIt and put your car back exactly the way it came from the factory. And that's part of the unique way that OrBIt makes config changes. It doesn't change your build code, so there's no need for you to worry about what changes you made, and when you made them, you can always click this button, Restore to OEM. When I make changes, like I have speed limit here, I have a lot of other changes on my car. I wonder if we can see some here. probably too many things to show. Some of them are like the adaptive cruise control, enable pilot assist on the car and whatnot. If I want to save those settings, I can click on Save Settings here, and I can save all those settings so that I can use them later. And you'll see this is useful if you're going to maybe make a visit to the dealer. Just going to test my settings here. I'm just going to save a file with all the settings. So if I want to go back to those settings, or I tried some things and then I can't remember how to get back, I can easily save those. And then I can load settings here, which I won't do while it's programming, but I can load settings that I've saved so that I don't have to go through and find the settings again and rename them and change them. Well, it looks like we're almost done programming here. You can see the programming process itself is pretty short. There's some other checks, and then we run a post-programming process to try to leave the car with no residual codes or issues when it's done programming. Looks like we're almost done here. Should I pause, or will we wait for it? Looks like we're just about done. So you'll know when it's done when we go back to green up here, and OrBIt will report that programming was successful. If there is an issue in programming, then OrBIt will come back and it will say that the flash wasn't successful, and then we'll give a reason for that. And there's logs, and so you can contact support@spacetech.com and we'll figure out what went wrong. So now we made the change and the configuration has been reread from the car, but at any time I can reload it from the car again with the button up here, and it will read the configuration again. So we just read and refreshed it. So my speed limit is now 190 miles an hour. So now let's get to restored OEM. So this is probably most useful for if you are making a visit to the dealer and they're going to connect Vita and you don't want any problems with a modified configuration, you want to restore to OEM. So if you click this button, it's just going to ask me if I want to flash the OEM config logic to the car. I'm going to say OK, and it's going to do that, and that's going to wipe out any modified configuration that has been made and put the car back to exactly as it came from the factory. Just like that. And that'll be another flashing process. I should stop and mention here that anybody who has made previous configuration changes with other software that doesn't work the same as OrBIt, so most likely that would be VDash. You should set your car back to original before using OrBIt. You don't have to, but it's probably best that you do. So say you change your speed limiter with VDash previously and now you want to use OrBIt, you should change the speed limiter back to the original setting with VDash, and then you can use OrBIt from there. That saves you from having to revert changes in both OrBIt and VDash when you make configuration changes. Once you change everything back that you changed in another software, then you can start using OrBIt, and when you restore to OEM, it'll truly restore the configuration to OEM. I'll pause real quick here and I'll pick it up as soon as this flashing is done. So the flashing process is done here, and the car has been restored to OEM. So I have, you can see the speed limiter here. I have a 2019, so the original speed limiter is 130 miles per hour. So the process has been complete. The car is restored to original, all factory settings. The other thing that I can do now is when I come back from the dealer, say I did restore to OEM, car went to dealer, they connected to Vita, and I didn't have any problems because the car is configured as original. When I come back to OrBIt, I might want to reload the settings that I had previously, and the way to make that easy is to save them ahead of time. So I'm going to go ahead and load my settings file that I just saved. So if I load this file, this is going to change. This is going to set all of the things that I had changed. So you can see I have a lot of things. I have adaptive cruise control enabled. I was playing with this brake pad setting. I have no idea what it does. I have slam locking enabled. I have automatic locking set so that I can turn it on and off by the census menu. I have adaptive high beams enabled. These are really cool. You might want to try them out, and they work whether you have the bendy headlights or not. Fog lights allowed in all cases, so they're not restricted on a U.S. car like they are on all U.S. cars. There's a bunch of other things. This one here is to support the Euro taillights that I installed in the car. So there's a ton of settings there, and I don't have to go through and set those again. I can just load them from a file. When I click right to car, you're going to see a huge list. If you have this too and it goes off the screen because the resolution is not high enough, just know if you close the window to cancel, but if you press enter, it'll go forward and flash. So even if you can't see the OK, you can get through it. So now it's going to do another flash, but it's going to flash all of my personalized settings back. So that's the easy way to switch back and forth between the original configuration and then all of the changes that you've made, your personalizations. I will pause for just a sec here while this flash goes so I don't waste your time, and I'll be right back. And our flash process just finished up here, and our settings are now back to my personalized settings. So you can see, I always look at the speed limiter to see it's 190 miles per hour, and all the other things that I've changed are back now. So it's pretty simple to go back and forth between stock, original configuration, and your settings. And I think that's about it for getting you up to speed from no OrBIt installed to making configuration changes on your car. So thanks for checking out this video, and I hope it's helpful.